You're listening to Passions and Prologues, a literary podcast where each week I'll interview a different author about a thing they love and how it inspires their work. My name is Adam Sokol, your host, and as I like to say, hey nerds, how you doing? If you've enjoyed the first few episodes of the show and are coming back, good to see you, good to hear from you, good to be heard. And if this is the first time you're listening to the show, thank you for joining. I promise you this is going to be different than any other literary podcast you've ever heard so far. This is a new podcast, so if you are enjoying what you're hearing, if you don't mind leaving us a quick 5-star rating and a review wherever you listen to podcasts, whether that be Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or anywhere else. If you send me a screenshot of your review to passionsandprologues@gmail.com, I will respond by giving you a personalized book recommendation. Today's episode is with the wonderful author Kalynn Bayron, who you may know as the best-selling YA author of Cinderella is Dead and This Poison Heart. She has a couple other books coming out that we talk about a little bit later in the show, including This Wicked Fate and The Vanquishers. Kalynn is an absolute blast to chat with, and we'll get to that in just a minute. But before we do, I want to tell you a little bit about a book that I am currently loving right now, The Violin Conspiracy by Brendan Slocum. It came out this year, earlier this year, and it's really, really interesting. The main character's name is Raekwon McMillan, and he is a Black classical musician who, at the very, very beginning of the book, this is not a spoiler, he loses his priceless violin that he uses to play in all of these different prestigious musical competitions. And the book, basically, it starts with him losing and, having this violin get stolen. And then it jumps back in time to when he was a kid and how he discovered this very specific violin and how it was his great-great-grandfather's and just sort of all the different things he has to overcome growing up Black in rural North Carolina, and how he overcomes all these things to become this incredible musician, and then ending up having to try to track down this violin that he loses. So I am kind of just starting it. I'm about, I think, a third of the way through the book, but so far I am absolutely riveted. So that is something that I am really, really loving right now. And this will make a little bit more sense as soon as we get into our conversation with Kalynn. But I'm just going to say, as a thing that I will recommend that I also love, if you have streaming services, whether it's Amazon Prime or Netflix or any of those different things, try to find The Wiz. If you have never seen The Wiz, it came out in October of 1978, and it is an incredible spin on The Wizard of Oz with an all-African-American cast. We talk a little bit about it in this particular episode of the podcast. But if you've never seen The Wiz and don't know what I'm talking about, look it up. At the very, very least, listen to the song Ease On Down the Road. I promise you that you will love it. That's just about all the housekeeping. Again, if you have any feedback or if you want to get a book recommendation from me, you can always send us feedback at passionsandprologues@gmail.com. Or, again, just screenshot any reviews that you leave us and send those to me at the same email, and I'll give you some book recommendations. I'm not going to keep you here in this introduction any longer. Let's get into my wonderful conversation with Kalynn Bayron on Passions and Prologues. So we can just kind of like dive into it, and how I'm having people start this is just, I'm just going to let you tell me and the listeners, like, what is the thing you're super geeky and passionate about that we're going to talk about today?
I love musical theater, and I mean music in general, but especially musical theater, specifically the Phantom of the Opera. I'm a little obsessed. I always have been. Musical theater and opera, which it's kind of like Phantom of the Opera. It's like this perfect marriage of all the things that I really love.
So Phantom was actually, that was the first like musical thing I remember ever seeing. I was like super little, and I'll get into my story about it after we let you talk about the stuff. But like, when did you first discover, and we can start with Phantom, because I feel like that is very much like a musical gateway drug for people.
It is. So, and just like as a disclaimer, I have yet to see it live. I'm this obsessed. I'm a little scared to actually go and see it live because I feel like it's going to like wreck my life. Like I'm just going to be so like, I'm so obsessed already. I grew up in Anchorage, Alaska, and there's not a ton of like shows coming through. For me, I was about, I want to say I was maybe like 10, and my neighbor girl, she was in high school and she used to babysit me. She was babysitting, and they had done like a field trip or something to the Performing Arts Center in Anchorage, and they saw Phantom. Yeah. And she became like super obsessed with it. So one time when she's babysitting me, she had the CD. She had the soundtrack, and she put it on. And so I was 10. I felt like I can literally, like, as I'm thinking about it, like I'm literally like reliving that moment. I can remember it so clearly. It went like into my freaking soul. Like, like I'm not trying to be dramatic. Like it really affected me. I was like, what is this? I'd never really heard anything like that before. I became obsessed. I was staying with my Aunt Wendy at the time, and she bought me the CD. I played it nonstop, and I was 10. None of my friends understood what I was listening to. They were like, what are we doing? Why are you listening to this? Like, why are you obsessed with this? They were just like mad and confused. That was kind of where it started for me.
Yeah.
And it changed my life. Like it influenced what I went on to study in college, and music just kind of dominates my life. It always has. So that's kind of where it started for me.
Yeah. So I can actually remember, I think I was like 5 or 6, but my family, I live in like just outside of Cleveland, Ohio, and I kind of grew up in this area. And a little known fact about Cleveland is we have, outside of New York City, we have the largest theater district in the country. Like people don't realize that about Cleveland. And so now as a theater goer now as an adult, like we get first run everything. Like we got Hamilton right after it left New York. And we get their season this year has Hadestown and like all these things that everyone wants to see they come to Cleveland, which is great. But when I was like 5 or 6, my parents took me and my 3 siblings to Toronto to see Phantom of the Opera. And like, we were not like a family of means or anything. Like, we never, I don't know why. To this day, I should probably ask my mom, like, why did we go? Like, did we get
why were we there? Yeah.
Like, did we win a radio contest? I don't know why we were there, but I think I was like 5 or 6. And at the time, we saw Phantom. That was my first ever experience with a musical of any kind. And to this day, she reminds me of this because I love theater now. But I leaned over to her as like a 5-year-old, and I was like, "Hey, Mom, when are they gonna stop singing?" Because I didn't understand what we were doing.
Right.
I just had no concept. But so like I remember seeing it then, and it kind of stuck with me. And that was one of the musicals where like my mom, when she was like cleaning on a Sunday, it would play, our house, and I gradually grew to love it as a 5-year-old. I just didn't understand. That was the same thing for me. That was my first real interaction to theater. And then like my siblings loved like Rent. And so like we would kind of like, it sort of like blossomed out from there, and like Joseph and the Amazing Technicolor Dreamcoat and stuff. But it started with Phantom for me too. So like for you said it kind of affected what you studied in college and everything. Like, what was it? You said it kind of like entered your soul. Like, do you think there was, now looking back on it, something particular about just how different it was, or the lyrics, or like the music?
And I'm trying to think. So I'm pretty sure that the first song that was playing was Wishing You Were Somehow Here Again. And I just remember almost being sad. It was just emotional. And at the time, I don't really think that I had the kind of language for it, but I feel like it was emotional, and it was just so different. And so when I heard it, I think there was just this kind of curiosity that was piqued in me. And then from there, it kind of opened up, like you said, it's kind of this gateway to everything else. I told my parents, and they took me, I saw Sweeney Todd, way too young, but I saw Sweeney Todd. I think that there are just these kinds of musical references that when I was a kid, so Annie was like on repeat in my house, The Wizard of Oz, The Wiz, all of these things were just kind of a part of my very young childhood. And then when I discovered Phantom, it was kind of like, this is like a culmination of all these things that I love, because I was obsessed with music in general. So I really just think it was something in me that I don't know. It just kind of like, when you discover something that you just absolutely love, and you feel like, oh, this is going to be a part of my life forever, no matter what. That's kind of what that moment was for me. And then over time, I saw there was a movie before the movie that came out in like 2004 with Gerard Butler or whatever. There was another version that I saw at some point much, much earlier than that. And then of course there's like a black and white, there's like a 1925 version, a film version, which is much more like a horror movie, which of course I love because I love scary stories.
Yeah.
And so, it was just, oh my gosh, it was just a kind of a combination of all these things. And then as I got older, it was something that I came back to just again and again and again. And like I said, I decided to study classical vocal performance in college. I'm still obsessed. I'm still obsessed to this day. Just recently, read the book. Phantom of the Opera is based on a book by a French author and Gaston Leroux. And I finally read that. Yeah. And I love the book. I love the book too. It's, it's told in such a way that kind of makes you feel like the author is telling you that this is a real thing that happened. And so it makes you feel very much like it's this kind of horror story / detective story / love story. Yeah, I love the book too. So yeah, I remain obsessed to this day.
Well, yeah, and I think one of the things that I started to pick up on, I dedefinitely not as a 5-year-old. As a 5-year-old, I was just like, when can I go to the bathroom and not be sitting in the theater anymore? But the more I've been really fortunate to see it. I've seen it in Cleveland a bunch. I saw it in Las Vegas when they had a dedicated theater in Las Vegas. So when the chandelier would come down and they would do all these different moments in the musical that on a production that is a touring production, it looks amazing, but in a theater that's built for the show, stuff just happens. It's amazing. And there'd be these little moments where we were talking about wishing you were somehow near here with me. I think that's the end of Act 1. I think it's the very end of Act 1. At the end of that song, the Phantom is kind of watching what was happening in the graveyard. For people who haven't seen Phantom, they're like, what are you talking about, Adam? Just stick with me. And but he has this moment where he kind of goes through 5 different emotions where he's upset and depressed and sad about everything. And then he gets angry. And then that's kind of when the plot takes off. And I just I feel there's so much nuance in that one moment where even me as a person and as I was a teenager, I'm oh my God, that there's so much in this singular moment.
Yes.
Storytelling.
Yes. And I think that's the thing. And I think that Andrew Lloyd Webber himself even says, there's a documentary, I think it's called Behind the Mask, that I've watched a million times, just about how the production came to be. And in that, Andrew Lloyd Webber even says that this story just has so many different elements to it. It's this kind of tragedy, but it's also a love story, which is a whole other thing, because I just think it's not hilarious, but I just think it's funny that, you have this story and everybody's really obsessed with the Phantom and his kind of mysterious, charismatic thing. And all I think about when I see him is just sir, you live in the sewer, you are stalking Christine, please, you are not hot. This is not it. So it's just funny to me, but it's it has all these different elements to it, and it's just so compelling. It's you can't help but kind of be drawn in by it.
So talk to me a little bit about we were talking about studying in college. How does one get that? Because that's seems like a very unique and specialized type of a course of study. Walk me through that. Was it from a performance standpoint or a studying standpoint? I did not know this about you.
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. I did it specifically because I wanted to perform. And that's still something, I still sing quite often. I still have a vocal coach. But I have terrible stage fright. Awful. It's so funny. I'm oh, I can do this. I feel like I'm good at it. I could do this. And then I have hello anxiety. One of the things that being a writer has really helped me with, because they don't tell you when you write books and, you're going to have to go out and talk to people face to face. You're going to have to get over that kind of, I think a lot of writers are introverts. And so you kind of have to learn to talk to people and put yourself out there and be in front of crowds. And it's really helped me confront that that kind of stage fright, that kind of anxiety. And I don't know, I feel like it's opening other doors for me, even at my kind of big age. You know, it's because it's something I never really gave up. I studied in college, and then, you know, life kind of happened and I ended up doing other things, but it's always been there for me. And I think how you kind of come into that, I think you just have to have a love of music and performance and the stage. And that kind of thing it's just kind of within me. And I think back on the things that I loved as a kid, like I said, Annie, The Wizard of Oz, The Wiz, but there are so many references to opera in pop culture all the time. And when I was a kid, there's a scene in Beetlejuice, which is one of my favorite movies ever, that has a song from Lucia di Lammermoor, which is one of my favorite operas. There's a song there. Also, The Fifth Element, which is another favorite movie of mine. Yeah. And the diva, you know, during her performance, those opening lines are from a real aria, again, from Lucia. You know, that song, that's one of the most memorable scenes in that entire movie. And people sometimes think that it was just for the movie, but no, that beginning part of that performance is from a real opera. There's a scene in The Witches of Eastwick, which is another favorite movie of mine, where they're in the ballroom with the balloons and they're dancing around. Puccini's Nessun Dorma is being sung in the background. And even now, Avengers, Age of Ultron, there's a scene where they're on like the jet or whatever, and Maria Callas is singing Casta Diva from Norma in the background. Like these little things are throughout all these pop culture references, and I was surrounded with them, and I was always drawn to those types of things. Like I said, those are some of my favorite movies ever. So it's always just kind of been there. It's always kind of been for me. And I feel like, I don't know, it feels like a very kind of magical thing for me. And now I'm a writer, but you know, these references kind of make their way into my work all the time. I'm discovering new things all the time. There's references to Hamilton and Hadestown in my work. And yeah, I just think it's a very kind of magical, fun thing.
Yeah, and I know what you mean. Like, speaking of magical, like I did theater in high school. I'm not a professional singer in the slightest. I might have a little bit of comedic timing, if anything, and that is it. I just did it because I went to a small school where I went to the type of school where like I was a captain of the football and baseball team, and I could also play like one of the secondary leads, not because of talent myself, because I graduated with 47 people and they're just like, you can sing a little bit, you're gonna be in Joseph. Like they just grab people. I know what you mean by like those magical moments, because I still remember to this day, like I always loved, like as a teenager, I knew that I loved musical theater, but then when I was a part of it, like you would do these rehearsals and you'd be backstage, and there are these like moments when you're in the cast that you feel like you're experiencing something that no one else can see. But then when you're when you're in a theater, an area that is designed for this like singular thing, and you're sitting there and, you know, whether it's something like Hamilton or Dear Evan Hansen, and there's, you know, 4,000 people in the crowd, or you're watching like a community theater version of The Wiz, like whatever it is, there's this moment where no matter what happens that night, like it's the only time it's ever going to be performed that way. Like,
right.
And I've always loved that. And I've always been able to not only appreciate how unique it is, but also like watching a person and knowing inherently, even though like I'm watching this, I'm in the story, but watching this person who I know is performing this thing 8 times a week, and they're sobbing and then they're laughing and then and I'm like, they are able to do this. And like, I don't know, I know what you mean about that. I feel like there's this magical moment that you can only get in theater. Yeah. And it happens like all the time.
It's one of those things where it's just like, I feel so kind of personally affected by it every time. And it doesn't, like you said, because every performance is unique. I remember sitting with my family. We saw Wicked. I got to see it in San Antonio when they came through there. And I remember we were sitting in like the nosebleeds. It was literally like all the way up in the back, but like this moment, you know, when Elphaba is on her broom and she's kind of flying and she's, you know, and it's just like, I'm a grown woman and I'm watching this and I am crying. Like I'm bawling my eyes out because it's just it's just such a visceral kind of experience. Like, it really is just amazing. And I know people who go to the theater and that doesn't happen for them. Yeah. And so, which is fine. But I'm just like, for me, it really is this like transformative experience every time.
Oh, yeah. 100. I remember this school that I went to, my 3 older siblings also went there. And even though it's a really small school, it had like a beautiful theater. It had no business having the auditorium that it did, but it was wonderful. And one of my sister's classes did Godspell, and her friend, like her best friend, Taylor, who would come over to our house, and he was like a big brother to me. He was such like a cool, like he was who I wanted to be as a high schooler when I was in middle school. Cause I was like, he cares about me as a 6th grader. But like he played Jesus, and like at the end, spoiler alert for Godspell or the Bible, I guess, but Jesus, right. And like, I remember sobbing, even though I knew that it was like my sister's friend and he was going to be okay. Like, I was just a wreck to the point where like after the show, he's like getting all of his accolades, like quite literally getting his flowers. And he like saw me, like came over and talked to me because I was still just like a gross mess. And he's like, "Hey, Adam, I'm okay." And like, I feel like I realized like in the coming like weeks, I was like, "Oh my God, theater can do this." And so I'm like you, same thing. Like, it doesn't matter what the show is. Like, if it's like, I see Company and like they sing Being Alive at the end, and I'm just like, that is what life is like. Sondheim gets me. It's like,
yeah,
every single time, every time.
And I think it's funny to me how like there will be scenes where I don't, you're not necessarily supposed to be like bawling your eyes out, but I do, because I'm just like, in Sweeney Todd, it's kind of like Mrs. Lovett is singing about her meat pies, and I'm just like, I love this so much. Yeah. Just crying and just making a whole fool of myself. But it really is just such a huge part of like who I am as a person. Mm-hmm. And which is it's one of those things where just as a young Black girl, there were a lot of people saying you don't really belong in this space. There's mm-hmm. not really kind of a space for you here. But I feel so connected to it. How can there not be a space mm-hmm. for me? Well, I saw The Wiz, and I felt like, oh, there's people here who like me, who can mm-hmm. do this. And so it's Audra McDonald and Stephanie Mills and Virginia Capers and Pearl Bailey and all of these people who just, Ethel Waters. It's like, you kind of opening this door, or, kind of peeking behind this curtain, if you will, to kind of say there's a place mm-hmm. for you here. And I love theater because it feels very much like there can be a place for mm-hmm. you. There's a place for us. Like, there's a place there. And so it's a very kind of, it's a special thing.
Ooh, actually, speaking of The Wiz, there's a true story. One of my best friends I met in college, her name is Candace. She's an African-American. Like, we became friends my freshman year of college because she was hanging out on our floor with somebody. And I was like, I had my room door open and I was listening to Ease on Down the Road. And she poked her head in and she goes, I did not expect to see a white boy in here. And I was like, we didn't know each other yet. I was like, hi. She's like, I'm Candace. And like, she came in and she's like, how do you know The Wiz? And I was like, I don't know. I saw it on TV. My parents put it on one day and we became friends because of The Wiz. And like, we stayed friends. But like, the thing that made us friends was her walking into my room and being like, why are you listening to The Wiz right now?
Like, what is going on in here? Yes. I love that.
It's such a good show. I want to get into a little bit of like, how do you think your love of musical theater, you kind of referenced it a little bit, but like, how do you think it shows up in your writing now? Like, how do you think it affects the way that you tell your stories?
Because I didn't really have an opportunity to see a lot of these shows live, for me in the beginning, it was a lot more like listening to soundtracks all mm-hmm. the time. And so in my mind, I was kind of having to visualize and kind of think about what this looks like and what does this, feel like. And then having just these experiences where I got to be in the theater as a young person, seeing Sweeney Todd, seeing Rent, kind of knowing what the setup was and thinking about it. I use that even now today in my writing. I feel like it really informs my writing quite a bit because I see almost everything I write as like a stage production. I'm a very kind of visual person. I need to be able to kind of see it and think about where things are and what people are doing, and all of that in my mind. That's how I see it. I see it like a theater production. There's that element, and then there's also, musicals pop up, in my contemporary work.
Yeah.
All the time. I can't help it. Like it's a problem. Like I just keep kind of referencing, these musicals, and it's kind of, I'm thinking about like, with my novel, This Poison Heart, it's like they listen to the Hamilton soundtrack on their way up to upstate New York. And in The Vanquishers, which is my middle grade thing that's coming out, it's like my main character's dad loves show tunes. And it's this reoccurring theme just because it's something I love so much. And I have a short story in an anthology called Cool, Awkward, Black. That's the anthology. And it's about these spaces, this anthology put together by Karen Strong. It's about, they are short stories about things that you can kind of geek out over that haven't always been safe spaces for Black people. And I have a story about a girl who loves musical theater, who sees The Wiz in it with the original cast, with Stephanie Mills playing Dorothy, and it changes her, like fundamentally who she is as a person. And so it's a recurring theme for me. I think it always will be. And so it informs how I write, but it also informs what I write. And it just, it's just so much a part of who I am. It just cannot help but kind of show up in everything I do.
Yeah. You've mentioned Sweeney Todd a couple of times now. Was that the first production you saw?
It was.
That's insane.
Which really kind of explains a lot about who I am as a person.
Oh man.
Yes. And I don't know what my mother was thinking, honestly. I'm trying to think if she had seen it herself. I don't know for sure if she had seen it herself first. I want to say yes, but she took 8-year-old me to go see this in Anchorage. And I was like, what is this?
Like, I'm just trying to picture, like, if she didn't know what Sweeney Todd is, like the first notes of it are like jarring and horrifying. Yes. Like it's instant.
Yes. And it's this, Attend the Tale of Sweeney Todd. I remember just hearing this and being like a little scared and a little like, what are we doing? Why is this? And then I remember very specifically the scenes where there is supposed to be all of this blood and, it was these red streamers that were they had this prop and these red streamers were coming out. And I just, that image is kind of like burned into my mind. So like I said, that says a lot about me as a person. I love scary things. I love musical theater. It's like the perfect kind of combination of those. Oh
yeah. I had that, like, when you mentioned it a couple of times, because I've seen it as well. And I feel like I've listened to every Sondheim thing a million times, but that especially. And I was just like, you said it so many times. I was like, I wonder if that was the first thing she ever saw. Cause that's like trying to come, I don't know. I'm trying to imagine you like young Kalynn Bayron being like, I saw this first, and then everything after that, you're like, well, that wasn't like the first. Like Rent wasn't like that. Like
right. And so for me, it was Sweeney Todd, and then it was Rent. Yeah, and then it was first seeing Sweeney Todd and then seeing Rent and being like, that's very different. Like I thought somebody was gonna get sliced up. I thought there was going to be, I thought everybody was going to be this drama and everything. But yeah, I'm thinking back on it now, and I'm just like, yeah, maybe good job, Mom. Maybe not, maybe don't take your 8-year-old to that show, but whatever.
Your mom taking you to Sweeney Todd, like I get it, because one of the first things that my parents like introduced our family to was we would listen to the rock opera Tommy's, like the Tommy by the Who. Right. And I remember like asking them like, what is this about? And they'd be like, it's about pinball. It's about pinball. And then like I saw it on TV, and it's just this like drug riddled thing. And I was like, hey Mom, hey Dad, what the hell is this?
You want to explain this to me? Because I thought it was something else. Yeah.
Exactly, yeah. So no judgment on parents. They're just trying to do their best. So you mentioned kind of your work in some of the upcoming. I want to I want to sort of transition to like kind of letting you talk about, because you have a book coming out in June and then September as well, right?
Yeah, so This Wicked Fate is the follow-up to my previous novel, This Poison Heart, and it follows a young girl, Briseis Green, and her family, and it is, I like to describe it, again, musical theater reference here, I like to describe it as Little Shop of Horrors meets The Secret Garden with a Greek mythology twist. The first book is really a good setup, but it's this queer normative story about this young Black girl from Brooklyn who moves to upstate New York with her moms, and they discover this big creepy house and a walled garden filled with the deadliest plants on the planet. And they uncover her family's very ancient lineage that is linked with some very famous Greek gods. And in book 2, we see Briseis go on this hero's journey. She is trying to unravel this mystery of her family. She's trying to save her mom, who is being held in the underworld by the goddess Hecate. It is really one of these stories that I wrote, and I was just like, this is, a story that I think is great to have in conversation with all of these books. There's been a lot of book bans lately. But this is another story with a queer girl and a queer family where they just get to be who they are. They just get to have this adventure, go on this quest, try to, right these wrongs. And that is what this story is about. It's a YA contemporary fantasy, comes out June 21st. And I'm incredibly excited about it. And then after that, The Vanquishers comes out in September. It comes out September 20th. So it's a middle grade. It's my first middle grade. And it is a vampire story. It takes place in San Antonio, in a kind of alternate future San Antonio, where vampires are known to have existed. And they were wiped out by a masked group of slayers called the Vanquishers. And things have been pretty quiet since this big event called the Reaping, which takes place 20 years before the events of the Vanquishers. And my main character, Boog, her name is Malika Boog Wilson, and her friends are kind of trying to navigate this world where people are learning to kind of let their guard down after all of the vampires have been wiped out. And then her new friend Erin goes missing after a night at the skating rink. Hijinks ensue and shenanigans ensue. So that comes out in September. I am very, very, very excited about that because, like I said, I love all things scary and vampires and paranormal. So this is perfect.
I was gonna say it's hilarious that so for people who, first off, if people haven't read This Poison Heart, they need to. It's so freaking good. And Cinderella is dead. Like, they need to read everything you do. But I was laughing when you're introducing it because you're like, it's a vampire book and this one's middle grade. So like, what made you go, I don't want to say step down, because that's not what I mean, but like go younger for the seemingly scarier book?
There are so many authors who are moving into adult, YA authors who are moving into adult. I love that. Like, I want to scare adults, but I'm trying to scare your kids, man. I'm trying to scare your middle schoolers. Like, I want them to have like these. I was so obsessed with vampire books when I was younger, but I was always reading like adult books because there weren't really like younger books for younger readers that had lots of vampires. So I was reading like Anne Rice, in middle school, which,
Incredible.
That's a lot. That also probably explains some things about me. But yeah, I wanted to go younger. And I love the middle grade space. It is so much fun. I would say it's even a little more challenging than writing YA just because, it's a new set of readers and they have different kind of language. And I respect my young readers so much, but I want to scare them. I want to give them a little taste of something scary. So yeah.
Well, and does it feel like you have to, because I've talked to a few people who have done like middle grade YA and adult, like, does it feel like when you were writing for middle grade that you kind of have to like get into things more quickly, or like what felt different from a writing standpoint?
Yeah, I feel like that attention span, you want to kind of grab them and pull them in faster. I think there's a little more patience maybe in YA to kind of have things kind of develop and play out. But in middle grade, it's like we gotta get to the point. Middle schoolers have, and I have kids, and so my middle schooler is, it's kind of like I'm talking to him and I'm like, would y'all say this? Does this sound right to you? Because you want to get the language right. You want to get the kind of feelings right. It's very different and challenging. I do think that you have to kind of get into things quicker, and the pace. You have to pick up the pace. You're doing a lot with a shorter story, because middle grade tends to be shorter than YA. And so, yeah, you have to like get to the point and stay on the point and keep them engaged. It's just so much fun. It's just so much fun.
You know what I was thinking while you're talking about middle grade, somehow this came up to me. I don't know if you read the Goosebumps books as a kid.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So I did too. I was obsessed with them. There was a Phantom of the Opera Goosebumps book. I'm looking it up as we talk. So it was Phantom of the Auditorium, which just absolute and if I remember correctly, just an absolute blatant ripoff. Like I think even the cover is like the half mask versus what I wrote. But like it literally was. It's literally like. The cover, I'll show it to you after we stop recording, but it's like literally a person with a mask and a cape in front of an auditorium. Like it couldn't be more. Like R.L. Stine was just mailing it, and he's like, "I just got to get another book out there." And it's like literally the exact same.
I didn't need an excuse to like go back and read more Goosebumps, but now I have one. So
I know, seriously,
I love that.
All right, a couple more questions for you. One, what is the best performance you've ever seen?
Oh my gosh, that's a really good question. I think, I'm going to get his name wrong, so I'm going to Google it. But there is a production of Sweeney Todd done. So it wasn't like a full-on stage production. It was filmed for television, and it had the guy who was playing Sweeney Todd. I got it right here. His name was, let's see. Okay, so it was live from the Lincoln Center. Sweeney Todd, the Demon Barber of Fleet Street. And it has Bryn Terfel. Is that his name? Yes. He is a fabulous Sweeney Todd. Yeah. His voice is so resonant, and it's perfect, and it's scary. And I watched it for the first time, and it has what's her name? Emma Thompson, I think. Oh, wow. Audra McDonald is in it. Emma Thompson plays Mrs. Lovett. Yeah, that production specifically, it's so well done. It's not like a full on, it's more like concert setting. There's some stage production, but it's not like a full on thing. And but it has all of the songs, and it was brilliant. And I love him in that role. And I saw that, and it gave me like goosebumps. It was one of the best performances of Sweeney that I've seen.
That's awesome. I feel like I found myself remembering almost more singular songs in productions than I do almost like the whole thing. Like I remember the first time I ever saw, have you ever seen Something Rotten?
I haven't seen that one. No.
So for people listening, Something Rotten is like it's during the Renaissance, and it's like this other playwright who is living in the same time as Shakespeare, but he's not as talented as Shakespeare, and like Shakespeare's kind of a dick. He's super like cocky and pompous, and this guy creates this musical called Omelette. And that's what it becomes. That's what Shakespeare steals and becomes Hamlet. But there's a song in the middle of it by like this soothsayer, and it's called It's a Musical. And like he is explaining the concept of musicals to this main character. And he's like, wait, you mean that they're just going to start singing out of nowhere? And he's like, yep, absolutely. He's like, does it advance the plot? He's like, not usually. And like, it's just like this whole concept of explaining what a musical is. And it's like a 7-minute song that references like 43 different musicals. And it's so funny and so memorable. So there was that. And then the other best song I can ever remember is Master of the House from Les Mis. They did a version of it here in Cleveland. The whole production killed it. And it was just like, I can't believe they're going to do the rest of the show. Like, don't even bother. It just was like so perfect. But I think I almost remember songs more than I remember like.
I think, and I've seen a recording. I didn't see it live, and I don't want to butcher her name, but her name is Willem Verkuyk is her last name. She plays Elphaba. And her farewell performance of Defying Gravity is probably the best thing I've ever heard. Like when it comes to just like a single song, maybe a very close second, or maybe like first place is Renee Elise Goldsberry's Satisfied. I mean, anytime she's singing, but specifically that. And I saw Hamilton when it came out on Disney Plus. I haven't seen that live either. But yeah, I think those two for me are like the top like single song performances that I've ever seen ever.
All right, so I am ending every one of these episodes by having the author I'm talking to give a recommendation for. It could be food, it could be books, it could be music. You can do a musical if you want. I will let you the floor is yours. Whatever you want to kind of recommend to people.
I would encourage everyone everywhere to read The Changeling by Victor LaValle. That is one of my favorite books ever. And I would encourage everyone to see Wicked. If you haven't seen it live, you got to go see it. And I love the musical theater. I love everything about musical theater, but Wicked just really has a special place for me.
Mm-hmm.
So those are my two recommendations, like The Changeling by Victor LaValle and go see Wicked. Go see Hadestown. Try not to cry, but good luck with that. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's perfect. Kalynn, thank you so much for joining me today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
Passions and Prologues is proud to be an evergreen podcast and was created by Adam Sokol. It was produced by Adam Sokol and Sean Rule Hoffman. And if you are interested in this podcast and any other evergreen podcast, you can go to evergreenpodcast.com to discover all the different stories we have to tell.
Step back in time and discover the untold stories of history's greatest heroes. From ancient civilizations to modern times, the Anthology of Heroes podcast takes you on a journey through history, uncovering the bravery and determination of those who stood up for what they believed in. These aren't just stories from old history books, they're the human experiences of those who fought for justice, freedom, and their principles. From the defiance of Vercingetorix as he stood against Rome, to the unwavering spirit of Skanderbeg as he faced down the Ottoman Empire, each episode is a journey through their life as we follow their triumphs and their failures. Meticulously researched with quotes and observations from primary sources, Anthology of Heroes is the perfect blend of expert research and engaging storytelling. So listen and subscribe now on your favorite podcasting app.